Welcome to WISB, Ambassador Tanmaya Lal. It is such a pleasure to have you here. We are at a very, very special place. This is the center point of Almedalen week. This is where it all started over half a century ago. And today, Almedalen week has grown to be one of the biggest meeting points and biggest festivals and celebrations really of democratic values as well as cooperation. And it is such a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for making that effort, Ambassador.
Thank you very much, Rupali. Thank you. And it's indeed a pleasure to be here. And it's a historic and important location. Wonderful morning. So thank you very much.
I will like to start with India-Sweden relations, and India and Sweden have had a long-standing relationship and one that is based on mutual respect and trust. Now, we are in the midst of a pandemic. In a post-pandemic world, really, how do you see this relationship evolving?
Yes, India and Sweden, as you have said, have a very long-standing friendship, and our partnership has really intensified in the last few years. And this partnership is a very, very wide-ranging partnership, from business, technology, investment, all the way to working together on global issues of the day, be it climate change or disarmament in the past or decolonization. If we see the political engagement, His Majesty's visit to India in December 2019 was a very substantive one. And this was just a few months before the pandemic. Last year, despite the pandemic, there were a series of ministerial engagements, very substantive ones again. I think almost 7 or 8 ministerial engagements at different sectors. This year, I've been here for 6 months, and in the last 6 months alone, there has been a virtual summit between our prime ministers. Our commerce and trade ministers have talked to each other twice. And earlier this week, our defense ministers, along with the industry participants, were having a substantive discussion again. So the series of political level engagement shows the high level commitment. Despite pandemic, it is continuing. Sweden had announced its decision to join the International Solar Alliance recently. We've had good interactions in the India-EU summit. We are also working together on the lead IT. In the recent months, several Swedish big companies have also announced their investment decisions, further investment decisions into India, like Sandvik and Autoliv. So the business engagement is really intensifying. IKEA has opened another mega store. And these major Swedish companies, they have also been contributing very significantly to the ongoing COVID relief efforts in India. Companies like Volvo, IKEA, Ericsson, Truecaller, ABB, all of them have been contributing in their own fashion. And we greatly appreciate that. So the engagement is continuing. Our companies and universities are collaborating on many joint R&D projects. And these are really issues which are relevant today on sustainability, on climate change, on life sciences, where we again have a very long-standing collaboration. So as we move towards a post-pandemic situation, I think all the relevant areas that are there facing us, India and Sweden are having a good collaboration. And this engagement looks to be set for intensifying even further.
That's fantastic, Ambassador. Also, one of the key global issues that is talked about at Almedalen Week is climate change. And there are always ways and debates and discussions on how one can lead a more sustainable life, how can one reduce the carbon footprint of the world really. In many ways, sustainability and a circular lifestyle is something which has been a part of the Indian ethos. How can India be a part of that thought leadership on circularity and on sustainability?
Climate change is indeed the top priority or top challenge facing humankind right now. And unless we all work together, it is unlikely to be managed. And if you see, there are many aspects to it. India has been at the forefront of both domestic action in terms of climate action and our global cooperation to take this fight forward. If we see really the issues such as environment protection, global warming, ozone depletion, they all came up in 1960s, started coming up. In 1972, Sweden in fact hosted the first UN conference on human environment. And India was the only country which was led, Indian delegation was led at the prime ministerial level. So both India and Sweden have a long record of being very active on these issues. It is not a recent issue for either of our countries. If we see in 1990s when the global negotiations started on a convention, Indian negotiators were among the first to present a full draft text of a convention. If we come to 2015 COP, Paris COP, there again India made a very positive and significant contribution, which was well appreciated and recognized. Also in Paris, India with France launched the International Solar Alliance, which has really attracted a lot of membership. I think we have around 90 members now. And India and Sweden in 2019 September launched a Lead IT initiative, which is the leadership group on industry transition. So India has been, along with Sweden, very, very active on these issues for a long time. Now you mentioned the civilizational aspect of the whole circular economy and sustainability. If we see in Indian tradition, there is no dichotomy between nature and humanity or human beings. That's more a Western thought. So if you see, even a Western science now acknowledges things like feedback loops, carbon cycle, water cycle, all these things are linked. And Indian thought has always appreciated this web of life, this interdependence of the habitats, of species, of human species. These are not separate. So in our tradition, we have plants or trees who are sacred. Animals or birds who are sacred. So there is a very fundamental understanding of how every being is dependent on each other. And at the same time, there is this tradition of sustainability, of reuse, recycle, trying to not go to the extremes. So those insights are already available and they are there in the Indian tradition. And that is perhaps helping us when we now look at how to manage climate change.
So India and Sweden are at the helm of the leadership of industry transition. This was announced at the UN Climate Action Summit in 2019. Now, has the pandemic in any way impacted the course of action, and how do you see the pathways ahead in helping industries transform into cleaner energy industries?
Yes, again, India and Sweden had come together in September 2019 at the UN level to initiate this leadership group on industry transition. And this is really a group which is trying to see how we can encourage some of the industry stakeholders who are engaged in more polluting industries, how they can move towards cleaner technologies. This was launched in September 2019. And within 6 months, pandemic had started to take grip. But again, despite the COVID, there have been many developments in the Lead IT process. I think in July last year, there was a Industry Transition Day which was celebrated, and it helped generate awareness and advocacy internationally. Then there was ministerial interaction later in the year where a joint ministerial statement was also issued. There were other stakeholder consultations. I know that, for instance, in India, there were extensive consultations with the industry players by our Ministry of Environment and Forest and Climate Change to encourage them to take action and move towards cleaner technologies. Recently, when President Biden had hosted the Climate Leaders Summit, there they announced the decision of the US to join this group also. And now the membership has grown to, I think, around 31, which contains both countries and the companies, and includes France, Germany, UK, Austria, Republic of Korea, and many other countries. So there is a clear trend. This has been only 1.5 years so far, but there is a recognition among the policy makers and the private players that this is the way to go, and this makes also business sense besides a climate change impact.
Engaging India at Almedalen Week is a marquee event for future urbanisms at the Uppsala University and Zero City. Now, what is the potential that you see for a collaborative approach when it comes to collaborative research, collaborative academic studies, institutions coming together, and collaboration at a government and corporate stakeholdership level for creating cleaner economies and restoring an ecological balance?
I think there is no other way forward but collaboration, and we are really talking about issues which affect us all, the future of our next generation, so to say. So no longer people can work in silos, whether they are universities or government agencies or industries, because cooperation from everybody is required to make progress. So while the government agencies can lay down the guidelines, facilitate interaction, enable an environment in which business can be done, similarly the fundamental research and breakthroughs in technology come from universities, and the private players are the ones who can use that to scale up the interventions. So these collaborations are what is the need of the hour. And this is increasingly happening both in India and Sweden and between our countries. If we look at Sweden, there is of course the triple helix model, which is very well known, and there is very seamless cooperation between all these various stakeholders. And increasingly in India also you will find that especially in the last year and a half, you see universities coming up with quick breakthroughs and solutions which are then, let's say, the investors are there to take the process forward, and the government is also very keenly encouraging, either by way of seed money for these research projects and so on. And between India and Sweden, as I mentioned, there are any number of joint industrial R&D collaborative projects which are going ahead for many important areas: smart cities, smart grids, clean technology in water, e-mobility. So this collaboration is obviously needed, and it is increasingly growing.
One of the backbones of innovation in India has been its ability to scale and scale at speed. However, one can always learn from other countries. What are the takeaways that you feel that one can pick up, and learnings one can pick up from Sweden, especially when it comes to the innovation ecosystem, when it comes to startups, and when it comes to sustainability-driven ecosystems?
Yes, I mean, you mentioned how the Indian uniqueness in certain ways is about the ability to scale up very quickly. And that is happening in many different areas. I think one example which immediately comes to mind is the financial inclusion process, which is very relevant for the development progress of India. And there, if we see, we've been able to incorporate the whole process of biometric ID cards for more than 1 billion people in a very short time. The issuance or the opening of new bank accounts for the unbanked people from poorer and vulnerable sections, women, and the use of smartphones. So while combining all these three different processes, substantial financial inclusion has been achieved in a very short time, which has been acknowledged the world over. So innovations like this, either in processes or in technology, are really changing, bringing about transformational change. Whether they are using, for example, in the recent months, breakthroughs relating to medical equipment or diagnostics or ventilators, or artificial intelligence-based social media interface platforms. They are really able to upscale the interventions very quickly. So that's the uniqueness which we can find in India. But of course, we can try and see what the others are also doing in a good way, and in fact many better processes. And then again, if we look at Sweden, the triple helix model is where there is a lot of synergy already existing, and in India it is now building up. So that is a way to go. We have to learn from this. Also, Sweden is among the top countries when it comes to innovation. And that has to do with many factors and how the ecosystem of innovation is and then startups is done here. And I think, based on my limited experience here, one thing is that it is safe to fail. So the entrepreneurs can take risks, which is really needed for implementing innovations and startups. And safe to fail means that you have the basic requirements taken care of, and you don't have to worry as to whether you suffer a loss or it fails. Then what happens? So that allows people to come out and really dare to innovate. And this is also increasingly happening in India, and government agencies are providing seed money, are providing other facilities for the ecosystem to grow. And India is also rapidly coming up in the innovation parameters. We are among the top 50 now, and have really jumped up several notches in the last couple of years. So there's always good to see what others are doing well, and then to try and incorporate that if possible.
Indian leadership has often requested the world to look at India from a civilizational lens. If one looks at India's contribution to the world over centuries, whether it is the concept of zero or whether it is plastic surgery or how it started, one can say that India has been an open source nation, if I may call it that, over centuries. How does the civilizational perspective really facilitate the world to engage with India from a more strategic perspective?
Very interesting question, I must say. Well, I mean, if you look at India, what, for example, immediately comes to mind is 1/6 of humanity. And whatever there are, let's say, global issues, whether they are climate change or peace and security or pandemic or any big issues, I think whatever India contributes has global relevance. So that's a fact. Now, if we see, you talked about the civilizational context, and India is one of the very few ancient civilizations. So this civilization has been there for a very long time, millennia. And there has been a consciousness about India among the other civilizations and other peoples from millennia. So breakthroughs in faiths or new spiritual thought or mathematics or calculus or metallurgy or astronomy, all these were known outside India. There are several recorded instances of scholars from other, you could call civilizations or societies, coming to India to study and to see how things were being done. There are ancient universities of Takshila and Nalanda where there were thousands of scholars studying at a point of time and from all over the world. India was a major economy till a few hundred years ago. India was among the dominant economies. That again was a magnet for others. There were many things which which made India stand out in those centuries. If you see now, after independence again, we are now a very fast growing economy, a major economy. We have scientific breakthroughs to our scientists have been able to send rockets to the moon and Mars. We have working with nuclear technology, biotechnology, IT. All these things are, again, things which are of relevance when you talk about the strategic engagement and so on. And there is a continuity. India was a maritime power earlier, and India again has a good maritime strength. We are able to provide assistance whenever there is required in our, for example, extended neighborhood. So all these, there has been a continuity in terms of the civilizational ethos, thoughts, and how we are perceived now. If you look at some of the major breakthroughs in recent times, like human rights or gender equality, again, these have been embedded in the Indian civilizational thought. Gender equality, there was always in the Indian tradition equality among the two, among the male and the female aspect. if you see when the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was being adopted, even a year before our independence, the Indian delegate, Mrs. Hansa Mehta, was the one who introduced, who replaced the words that all men are equal or born free and equal to all human beings. And those are very, very transformational changes, and they have guided future constitutions, future other such declarations. If we look at other debates through recent decades, decolonization, anti-apartheid, a fairer equity and economic system, climate change, vaccine equity, all these are very, very relevant, and they come from a civilizational ethos of wanting good for everybody and having no discrimination. I could even also mention the International Day of Yoga, which is coming up very soon. So there is a widespread recognition of these thoughts and these values which have defined India for a very long time. If we look at our development partnership efforts with solidarity with our partners in Africa and many other nations, developing countries, we have worked with them according to their priorities because we share similar experiences and we do not work with any conditions. So these are different models. So and this is, I think, recognized very well. You take the Indian diaspora, 30 million strong Indian diaspora, and these are all our ambassadors. And they tell people outside India about the Indian professionalism, Indian ability to work, to coexist peacefully. So these are all, I think, civilizational ethos and values which have always been there. And whether it is at a personal level or a broader level between societies or on fundamental issues, I think our contribution and participation has always been there. And perhaps it's very difficult to find any other country of this size, 1/6 of humanity we just spoke about, a major economy, a major technological power, and such a diverse country which is moving ahead in a democratic setup. So this in itself makes strategic sense perhaps for interaction with how others perceive perhaps India and how we can move forward.
Right, and talking about moving forward, Ambassador, during the World Environment Day, the Foreign Minister did write about a greener foreign policy for India. Could you elaborate on the greener foreign policy?
Yes, so again we discussed that sustainability and climate change are really real issues which we all of us have to work upon, and India has always been very, very active in terms of domestic and international engagement. Now and this is not for any other interest, but we know that it is in our interest to do so, and also everybody's interest to collaborate upon. So that's the fundamental premise. Now if we look at the things that are going on in India, there's really transformational in terms of cleaner energy transition and sustainability practices that are being introduced. So we have committed very, very strongly, including at the Paris COP, and we have been raising the ambition of our climate action very, very significantly. And now we hope to implement or achieve a capacity of renewable energy of 450 gigawatt by 2030. It's a very big number, and it will really transform our situation and have an impact internationally. Again, we talked about the scale. So when we talk about, let's say, adoption of LEDs in India, it is almost equivalent to 40 million tons of carbon dioxide emission reduction every year. In recent years, 80 million new households are being provided cooking gas, for example. So that's cleaner, smoke-free kitchens and reduce the pollution. International Solar Alliance, afforestation at the domestic level, or trying to reverse the biodiversity loss. The numbers of tigers and lions in India is really, and elephants, is increasing. At an international level, of course, the International Solar Alliance, the LEAD IT, we are also working on the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, again, which has relevance to this. And these memberships are expanding. So many areas we are working on, and if you see the multilateral environment agreements, so whether it is UNEP or not UNEP but UNCCD or the Convention on Migratory Species, India is currently the president of the Conference of Parties on such initiatives or such multilateral agreements, and where we are contributing very significantly to the advocacy and to the way forward. So we are playing a part, and if we now look at let's say our development partnership, I spoke briefly upon how it depends on the priorities of our partners. In my previous station, we implemented the launch of a public transport system, and the new metro was inaugurated in 2019. That is a big transformation for all the parties concerned. It reduces congestion, it reduces the carbon emissions, and it is the first time that Indian companies have been able to implement a metro project outside. We are working very closely with many partners on solar energy programs, on wind energy programs. Many of the important buildings that are being constructed with partners are clean and energy efficient buildings. So all these things are now built in, and these aspects of how to have a more sustainable solution or train people for sustainability practices, or have impact on the global warming issues. So whether you see domestically international initiatives or our development partnership efforts, these are moving very clearly towards a greener and cleaner technology issues, and that is what I think it is meant when we say that we are moving towards greener foreign policy, and there is no contradiction because our domestic and external actions are in sync in that. So I think that is the way to go.
Well, thank you so much, Ambassador, for sharing these fantastic insights and having such an open conversation with me here at the Almedalen Week's epicenter, really. This is a celebration of open thought, of collaboration, of democracy, and India and Sweden go a long way in celebrating that. So thank you so much, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for this opportunity, and thank you very much for having us here. Thank you.